Oops. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. Hello, hello. And I apologize. Was just reading something, and as the time came up and had to jump on here. I hope that this Memorial Day weekend is something that is finding everyone in good spirits, that our military men and women, both in active duty and those who are back in civilian life, that you're finding this to be a good day, a day of peace and happiness. Hello, Janice. It's great to see you there. I want everyone to enjoy this and appreciate this day because, obviously, if it were not for the sacrifices that have been made over the centuries here in the United States, we would not have the freedom today to be able to speak with you, to be able to speak freely about the issues that matter to us all. It is only because of those sacrifices are we able to enjoy the freedoms and the quality of life that we have right now. And so I hope we can all remember that. And of course, we'll be speaking about Kamala Harris and her complete ignorance on that issue, as well as many other things. But the question really today is, in fact, what we saw in the title. How much freedom do you need? I think it's a timely question to ask, especially as we remember those who died to give us the freedoms we have right now. Freedoms that I believe are in danger. Freedoms that I believe are being whittled away by the march towards progressivism and socialism and the Biden-Harris administration and their efforts. It's troubling. It is troubling and something that we need to address because on so many fronts, we are looking at a demise of our freedom. We are looking at a danger to our nation and therefore to the peace in the world, because without the United States leadership, peace does not exist in this world. We see that constantly. The recent troubles for our ally Israel with Palestine is a great example of, as the United States becomes weaker under a Biden-Harris administration, we see terror and terror groups and nations that promote terror, like Iran, like Palestine, they act up and the world suffers. This is our thought. You may disagree. And of course, if you do, please call in. Now, let's mention, if this is the first time that you are seeing the program, we welcome you and thank you for joining us from anywhere in the world. We do this every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. as an expression of free speech to allow people from everywhere in the world to be able to speak about the issues that matter to them. And we are reaching out to you on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, DLive, all social media. And you can also call into the program, as you'll see passing above my head. The phone number is 607-242-1582. You are welcome to call in to give your comments on anything that is of interest to you, something that you want to speak about, especially during this Memorial Day weekend. So let's get into some of the things that I'm talking about, because when I say, how much freedom do we need? I think it's a really big question, because we're being told constantly by the Biden-Harris administration we don't need a lot of freedom. We're constantly being told by progressives and socialists that we don't need as much freedom as we have. We are being told, and have been told for decades now, that the freedoms we have are too much. Government is smarter than any of us as individuals, and we need government to take care of us because we're not good at it. And this is a lesson that's being taught and sent out around the world to nations like France and Germany, England, the Middle East, the Far East. And we're seeing the repercussions of that today, and we will see more of them in the next 10 years. as we see critical race theory, another expression of less freedom, more government control, as we see that being taught to our children, indoctrinated in our schools. And the result of that will be them believing this is the truth in 10 years and 20 years as they begin to vote and as they become members of our society. Is this a problem? And I want to hear what your thoughts are. Janice has already said hello. Anyone is open to say what they think, whether you agree with us or not. We want to hear what you have to say. Because again, this is about free speech. And if we don't talk about this, then things go badly. There's a reason why there is a First Amendment. So let's look at this. One of the first things I wanted to bring up is when we think about what our government is doing right now, when we look at the Biden-Harris administration, we have to understand they're not as invested in what's going on in our country as we are. And I say that not simply because that's something I think so. It's based on what we're hearing from them directly. According to CNN Politics, again, CNN Politics is highlighting the fact that Joe Biden, as quoted from the White House itself, that Joe Biden thinks of the White House more like a Monday through Friday kind of place. This is as they're trying to justify the fact that Joe Biden is not constantly in the White House, that he spends a lot of his time back in Delaware because he doesn't feel that he needs to be in the White House over weekends. And they try and justify this by mentioning, well, other presidents have also spent time away from the White House, although Joe Biden has set a record on this. This is unprecedented, the amount of time he spends away from the White House. That's troubling to me. That shows a lack of effort, a lack of consistency, a lack of concern. Now, I know that this is something that they're saying that he's been doing throughout his entire career. But when we look at this on May 30th, as reported by Kate Bennett of CNN Politics, this is his work ethic. He believes that the White House is something to be focused on Monday through Friday, and the weekends are his time to be away. Not to say that Joe Biden isn't aware of what's happening or made aware, but that it's not his priority. And I have to say, that's troubling, isn't it? Maybe you disagree, but the presidency, the leadership of the world, and realistically, the United States leads the world. When you say it's a 9-to-5 job, that it's Monday through Friday, that's not how the world works. That's not the leadership that the world is looking for. It is an encouragement to some of the worst in the world. We're talking about Iran and other nations that support global terrorism. They're looking at that saying, oh, so we're only really focused on us like it's a job, like 40 hours a week. Maybe we should take advantage of that. Maybe we can get away with things when you're not paying attention. When Joe Biden is spending the weekend in Delaware trying to relax and forget about his day job, and that is a problem, I think. Janice mentions no president was as hardworking as President Trump. Ron is saying hello. Hello, Ron. And there is no question there is a difference in the work ethic between most recently the Obama administration, the Trump administration, and the Biden administration. And looking at just those three, the Biden administration seems to be the least hardworking as compared to Obama or Trump. I would make that comparison. And in fact, CNN does make that comparison, and that Joe Biden is, of the three, the least productive, which is something to take into account. So this isn't a Democrat versus Republican thing. This is a Biden administration question. And we know that Joe Biden has deferred his responsibilities in talks with South Korea to Vice President Kamala Harris. We know that the southern border crisis has been offset to Kamala Harris. We know that Joe Biden has deferred most things to Kamala Harris. And we're not seeing leadership from Joe Biden. I mean, think about the interaction with Israel and Palestine during the Fourth Israeli-Palestinian War. Where was Joe Biden? He was taking a backseat to Egypt. Egypt, of all places. With our greatest ally, our only ally in the Middle East. And he was nowhere to be seen, had nothing to say until it was all done after Egypt had done the work that normally the United States would be involved with. Mike Bowie says he's only a figurehead. It doesn't matter where he is. Speaking of Joe Biden. Hello, and Christina says hello. Hello, Christina. And folks, again, you can also comment from any of the social media or call in at 607-242-1582. So I agree. It seems like Joe Biden is a figurehead, which is why the Biden administration, the Biden White House, refers to and has directed news media to refer to his administration as a Biden-Harris administration, something we've never seen. You never heard of the Trump administration as a Trump-Pence administration. You didn't hear of the Obama administration as an Obama-Biden administration. You can go back in history, no president has looked at their administration as being co-equal to the vice president because they aren't. Because the primary purpose is the president. They lead the nation. They don't share that responsibility. And when we see this being offset, well, I have to be concerned. And it's a terrifying thing, especially when we consider what is it resulting in? What is this kind of offset bringing to our nation? Well, here it is. Well, when we see Biden offset the responsibility, we get Vice President Harris saying, enjoy the long weekend. Hi, Jesse. It's good to see you as well. Enjoy the long weekend. Matter of fact, I want to show this again. This is the Kamala Harris, and if you're wondering that it's being missaid, people are pointing out the true meaning of Memorial Day, a day that falls on the last Monday of May to honor our men and women who died while serving in the U.S. military after Vice President Kamala Harris tweets, enjoy a long weekend. I mean, again, without the sacrifices of those who have died in efforts to promote our nation, to promote freedom, we would not be able to speak as we do right now. You would not enjoy the internet. You would not be able to speak at all. This would be like North Korea. We would be like China, where genocide based on religion is happening right now. Not that the Biden administration or the Harris administration are actually speaking about that, not that they are taking action about this to protect the Uyghurs, a situation that did not exist under prior presidents because the United States would not allow that we would speak up and our leadership would help guide the rest of the world to try and prevent this. And not to say that we're perfect. I mean, there is the Sudan where we failed for decades to stop the genocide that was happening there, although we did from time to time try to make some kind of effort. But looking at this now, we see China flaunting the fact that they are able to genocide the Uyghurs based on their religious beliefs, and we have the Biden administration cozying up to this genocide, looking at our companies like Disney cozying up to that genocide without complaint, where we see people like John Cena and all of Hollywood begging for the privilege of having China to use their products and to forgive them any and all of their horrible actions. This is troubling to me because it's a statement that, well, you don't need to have that kind of freedom. It's okay if you're not religiously as free as we have been in the past, as much as we have supported around the world in the past. That kind of freedom isn't necessary, apparently, based on the actions of the Biden-Harris administration. Perhaps because they don't appreciate what they're talking about. And again, I go back to look at what we are seeing. And this is Kamala Harris's Twitter feed. This is what she's had to say. I mean, she said 23 hours ago, her statement was, enjoy the long weekend. She knew what she was saying. She knew what she was speaking about. She was referring to the Memorial Day weekend and didn't have any concern about those who have served our nation and those who died in the service of our nation. She knew it. This was approved by her staff. No one questioned it. And if you're wondering, her comments beforehand on May 29th, just a day ago, what did she have to talk about? She had to talk about race in our military. She wasn't concerned about the death or the sacrifices made to preserve the freedom, to allow a black woman to be part of our military, for our military to even exist. No, she was worried about the color and the gender of people who are in our military. That was her concern. She's talking about on the 28th. She was concerned about our budget, our finances, and she wasn't, and this is right after she had gotten to the U.S. Naval Academy and made a speech where she was more concerned about being a woman and a woman of color who got to be able to make this speech as a vice president, not the fact that this was to celebrate our military and their achievements. She's worried about gender and identity. That's a problem. And you may disagree. You may say, Mike, well, no, that's really not a problem, Mike. We should be talking about gender and race on a weekend that we are talking about those who have sacrificed for a nation of every color, of every gender, of every religion and ethnic group in the history of the world, because they all exist here in the United States. But the progressive agenda is race, gender, sexuality. That's the preference. That's the focus. And in fact, it wasn't until there was pushback, as I showed you, from Twitter that caused Kamala Harris to then say, just recently, it took her almost 20 hours to finally say something about our men and women who served our nation, after she had been pounded on by members of not just political, but the public, saying she had no appreciation of the sacrifices that have been made that allowed her to have the opportunity to become vice president. And only then, after she had been assaulted, well, confronted, truly, only then was she willing to actually even mention that, hey, people have sacrificed to make America a great country and to lead the world as an example of democracy and freedom. That troubles me. That troubles me a lot. Maybe it doesn't trouble you. Maybe you don't think that's important. Maybe it's not a big deal. I tend to think it is. And I tend to think that most Americans agree. This is a big deal because it shows us that we have a presidency and a vice presidency that truly don't appreciate our military. They don't appreciate the freedoms that were earned by those individuals. Rather, they appreciate the politics, the way things look. They're more concerned about how things look and how to appease the public while they try and control our nation. That's what I see happening here. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you say, Mike, well, you're just not getting it. Well, let's think about this. How are they spending our money? I mean, this is Senator Rand Paul, and he's addressing the deficit in the United States. Now, this is a big deal. And you may say to yourself, well, Mike, what does our national deficit, what does that have to do with freedom? What does that have to do with whether or not government has more and more control over our lives? Well, let's think about this very carefully. The more in debt our nation is, the less our money is worth, which means the more poverty is being inflicted on our nation, the more hardship that is being led onto our nation. And this is being caused by the very leaders that are telling us, don't worry, government's going to take care of it. Think about that. That they're spending your money as wastefully as possible. And in this example that we see from May 28th, from Senator Rand Paul, we're spending $356,000, which may not sound a lot, but think about this. We're spending it on studying the cocaine habits of a quail. How is that going to improve your life? How is it going to improve anyone's life anywhere in the world to know whether or not giving cocaine to a quail is going to maybe make them more or less sexually active? That's just stupid. That's just a waste of money. Money that could be going towards things like cancer research, Alzheimer's research, maybe improved COVID-19 research. How about feeding the poor, housing children who are homeless? These are things that we could be doing, but instead we're studying the habits of a quail on cocaine that would never happen in nature. Never. You will never see a coke-addicted quail unless a human being is making that happen. So why do we care? And that's not the worst of it, as we see that Senator Rand Paul goes into in his discussion.
In recent years was $2 million to see if someone in the buffet line, when you're going through the buffet or Luby's cafeteria, and someone in front of you sneezes on the food, are you more or less likely to eat the food? $2 million. Now look, if you want to come to me and say we should study Alzheimer's disease, I've got open ears, heart disease, diabetes. But if you want to study whether somebody sneezing on the food makes you more or less likely to eat the food, that's just ridiculous. The American people know it's ridiculous. If the American people could see what we're voting on and saying, oh, we're going to combat China by giving more money to the most wasteful agency in the world. And where's the money coming from? Is it out of a surplus? Can we go over to the Federal Reserve and open this big safe? There's a big cache of money. Is there a rainy day fund? Is there a savings account that we can tap into to say we're going to have government-funded research to combat China? Well, no, we have to borrow the money from China. Think of.
Now, isn't that something when you think about it? And he highlighted something important. We're spending $2 million on trying to figure out if someone sneezes on food, are you more or less likely to eat that food? I would really love to ask everyone out there, please, anybody, Mike, Christina, Jesse, Janice, Ron, somebody, please let me know. Are you more or less likely to eat food that's been sneezed on right in front of your face? You see someone sneeze on it and you're going to eat that. Do you want to eat that food? Because it seems our government is paying people to try and figure this out, because it seems to be a question, because they're unsure of the answer. Are you kidding me? Think about this. How can you not define that as wasteful spending? And when you say, well, Mike, that's really not that big a deal. That's $2 million. Oh, that means nothing to our government. We spend billions. Yeah, but if we're spending billions on trying to figure out whether what the quail's going to do when it's high, when we're trying to figure out if we're going to spend money on trying to figure out if food is more appealing if it's been sneezed on, think of what else we are wasting money on. Think of the things that we are absolutely using this money badly for. $2.3 million. How would that improve your life? How would that improve the quality of life in your neighborhood? Think of all the things. How about $2.3 million being put into your pocket? Maybe it's only a couple of dollars, but it's a couple of extra dollars for you. It's less money being thrown out the window, being burned away. And even if only 10% of the spending that the government is doing is wasteful, that's $600 billion. The Biden administration has just come out and said that they want to spend $6 trillion. If only 10% of that is the wasteful kind of spending, like we've just seen described by Senator Rand Paul, of getting cocaine addicted quails and trying to figure out if food should be sneezed on or not. if it's only 10% of our total spending, that kind of wasteful spending, think of what we could do with $600 billion. We're talking about money that's ridiculous. We're talking about money that more than most nations will ever generate in a year or two. In some nations, even 10 years. Think of how much wasteful spending that is. $600 billion. And I'm being conservative saying it's only 10% of the wasteful spending of our government. And we all know it's way more than that. Some of the comments come in. Mike Bowie says, $2 million I would. If you individually were given $2 million, would you eat that sneezed on food? Yeah, I think we all might. But you're not getting that money. That's money that's being taken away from you. You're losing $2 million. Jenna says it's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible when we actually see what our government is doing. Christina says, less likely to eat food that has been sneezed on. It's wasteful spending. Yes, it is. And if you think that's the worst of it, oh no, it's not. And this is on top of things like the $300 million that we spent for the government of Jordan to run their government. And that is a government that is an oil OPEC rich nation that makes a profit. They have a surplus of money, and we gave them $300 million. We gave $235 million to the nation of Palestine so that they could buy over 4,000 rockets to fire against our own ally. We gave $10 million to the nation of Pakistan to teach them about gender studies. We're talking about more gender identity politics, to teach them about the critical race theory that is rampant in the United States that no other country in the world wants to hear about. That was actually outlawed in France. And yet we're spending hundreds of millions, billions of dollars wastefully. And think about all the money that could have gone to Alzheimer's research, cancer research. How about lowering the cost of insulin? How about lowering the cost of the EpiPen, which costs $600 per pen, not because it's exclusive license, not because it's a difficult thing to make. And even after the Trump administration was going to lower that price down to, I believe it was $50 per pen, reducing the price by $550 because of an executive order, that was canceled by the Biden administration because it had the Trump administration name on it, and people suffered. And part of the reason why that's happening is because we're not paying attention, and government saying, we're going to protect you. We're going to protect you from things like mean tweets. We're going to protect you against anything that was done by the prior administration. And the result is we have EpiPens that are $600, not $50. We have studies on quails on cocaine. We have studies on whether people should sneeze on food or not. And by the way, this study is as simple as go to your local food court, look and see that there is a sneeze guard. There's actually a plate of glass, a sneeze guard, to answer the question that it seems our government needs more money to figure out. Business has already decided this. The answer is no, people don't like that. Why are we wasting this money for something that has already been decided? That is already clear. Bojo mentions Democrats are destroying America. Government, a bad government is destroying America. A lack of leadership is destroying America. A leadership that cannot appreciate the freedoms that individual Americans already have. And I'm not saying that if you are a scientist, if you are in a college right now and you want to study what happens if you make a quail addicted to cocaine, go right ahead. And if you can find a private business that wants to waste its money in that manner, please go right ahead and do it. But if you're asking me that I should spend my tax money and $6 trillion in spending, part of that to be wasted on this program, No, that's not what my taxes are meant for. That's not what your taxes are meant for. That is a waste of our money, money that I could use far more productively in my life, because I don't care if a quail is addicted to cocaine. I don't care to ask a question that has already been answered by individual businesses. You go to Golden Corral or any of the various food courts, and you already have the answer. Go to the salad bar. Tell me if you're going to see a sneeze shield or not. You will. The question has already been answered. Why are we wasting my money, your money, on that? I mean, what's the point? It's a question that no one ever had to ask and was already answered, and yet we're spending money on this again because our leadership under the Biden administration, with a House of Representatives that is run by Democrats, a Senate that is run by Democrats, that they have come together and said, well, we need to just throw money at this. The answer is just throw money at everything. Doesn't matter what it is. Throw money at it. Because what else is America for? What else do we have to care about? Because they don't care about the fact that people have died for these freedoms. They've made it very clear. Kamala Harris has made it clear. And if you think I'm misquoting someone, all the links to everything I'm talking about will be in the description so that you can see this for yourself. This truly troubles me. This is truly troubling because we're seeing this at many levels of our government, not just at the federal level, but we're seeing this kind of cradle to grave guidance from government, from the progressive ideology that is invading every aspect of our lives. Earlier this week, I was speaking with the Republican Party the Libertarian Party of New York. Some people may have seen this. When I was part of a panel discussion speaking about a bill called A2681. It is a law in the in New York State. And this law says, in part, that if you have the flu, you don't have to go to work. And your employer must allow you to not come to work. And I'm not talking about taking sick days. I'm talking about because of your fear of the flu, you don't have to go to work. And your employer must spend tens of thousands of dollars to put in a new air conditioning, air filtration system because you could get the flu and you're going to have to pay for it. And that business will pay for it. And if they don't do it, they will lose $200 per day per employee until they do it. By the way, that means that your local mom and pop grocery store has to do this. And if they don't do that, then they will lose it. Now, think about this. Your local mom and pop business, maybe they don't even make $200,000 a year, but they have to spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to put in a new air filtration system that will block the flu. Something that happens every year that you cannot stop. And you can be vaccinated all you want. You can't stop the flu. And they have to build an air filtration system that will stop the flu. Do you know how much money that's going to cost? And you have to do it in New York State because it is a law, because New York State is protecting you. And I had some things to say about that. And in part, I said COVID. So when we look at this bill is an example of an overreach of government without having any idea of what the consequences are, without considering any of the science that is involved, and absolutely discounting both the individual and the businesses that have to comply with this monstrous, confused document that is now law in this state. And if I have misunderstood that, if I have misrepresented that, we have two lawyers and an assemblyman, please correct me, but I think I caught it right.
Ooh. Absolutely correct.
Okay.
I am not.
And there you go. That was Assemblyman Menkolo, who was saying, yes, I've got it right, that we are wasting money, your money. We're destroying small businesses, your small businesses, where you get to work. After we have destroyed in this state 30% of all small businesses that existed in 2019, they no longer exist. We have another 40% of small businesses that are about to fail, according to the studies in January of 2021. And now we have just added a new burden to these businesses that have just opened up and told them that without any revenue, even though they're about to go bankrupt and close, they have to spend more money to protect people against the flu, which you cannot stop. And if they don't do it, they're going to be closed. Think about how, does that sound like freedom, by the way? Does that sound like freedom for you? Does that seem like it's going to help you? Is the government really protecting you from something that happens every year, has happened every year in the existence of mankind, and is something that cannot be prevented, cannot? And yet, the government's saying, we're going to protect you by closing small businesses, by making more people unemployed, and taking away your freedom to run a business because the government says you don't deserve to have it. Think about that. How is that going to help anyone? How is that going to make things better? And we're bankrupting our nation by doing these things, by wasting this money, by spending money on things we shouldn't be spending money on. $6 trillion on gender and identity politics that isn't going to improve the quality of life for anyone. In fact, it may demonstrably make it far, far worse. I'll give you an example of what I mean. And please, if you disagree with me, if you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm not understanding this, please, you can see Bob, Joe, Christina, Janice, Michael, Jesse, they're all commenting. You can comment too. If you don't agree with us, if you think that we are misunderstanding things, please do let us know. But I want you to appreciate what we're talking about here. We're talking about people who died in our nation so that we could have $28 trillion in debt. $28 trillion in debt. Before the Obama administration, we had $9 trillion in debt. By the end of the Obama administration, we were looking at $20 trillion in debt. We're now at $28 trillion, and Joe Biden is looking to add another $6 trillion onto that. That's a big number. But here's the really scary part. Based on, and I'm showing you the numbers, based on the projections of the Biden administration, if we do this, if we allow the $6 trillion in spending and follow the ideology of the Biden-Harris progressive administration, we're looking at the United States in 4 years, becoming $50 trillion. We will almost double our national debt. $50 trillion. 192% of the money that we are able to bring in being spent every year. Think about that. 192%. And in 4 years, under the Biden-Harris administration, we will have less people working than we had in the year 2000. Think about that. We will have less people working in the United States than we had 20 years ago under the Biden administration, even though we'll have 346, almost 350 million people in America. This is the best case number. This is the best case expectation. That in 4 years, we're going to have 14 million people unemployed. That in that time frame, we're going to see 56 million people on food stamps, 39 million people living in poverty. These are the best case numbers. And that's versus where we see right now, 42 million. So you're looking at an increase of over 16 million people. We're talking about 30% more people in America will be on food stamps, which means poverty, because of the Biden-Harris administration and their policies, bankrupting the nation. And if you don't get it, if we double our debt, we're increasing the amount. Our money is worthless. That means that what you get paid has to double to keep up with this. That for you to have the $5 in your pocket right now, in 4 years, will be worth $2.50 because of the Biden-Harris administration policy. And the only way that it's going to be worth $5, you'd have to have $10 in your pocket to make up and be able to spend the same as $5. That's a projection based on the debt. Do you think you're going to double that? Everything that your business is going to double its revenues, that you're going to get double the amount of pay, that you're going to be able to afford double the rent and mortgage? Do you really think everything is just going to instantly double for you? No, it's not. And I don't care if you get $15 an hour or if you get $25 an hour, you're not going to see your value, your income double. It's not going to happen. The prices will go up, but you're not going to get that. And that's going to be the problem. And it's because there are people like the Biden administration that do not appreciate you having freedom. They don't appreciate the freedoms that people died for. And because they don't believe you are smart enough to live your life without the government telling you what to do. And that's why the government is spending more and more money to tell you more and more what you can and cannot do. You must wear a mask. You must be vaccinated. You must wear a mask even if you are vaccinated. You still have to socially distance even if you are vaccinated. Because the vaccine, well, we don't trust you to get vaccinated, and we don't trust the vaccine to work on you because you're a human being, and so you don't have that right. You don't have the freedom to be able to create new businesses because you don't know which business to do, because the government is going to decide which industries are the ones that you should be getting. That's part of that $6 trillion. They're going to decide which businesses are the ones that are going to succeed. If you're not in a business that's going to be promoting green energy, if you're not trying to create more solar or wind, well, then your business is not important because the government is deciding what is the choice. Your freedom doesn't matter. Mike Bowie mentions, don't you think most of this money is going into their own pockets? Not exactly, no. I think most of this money is going to protect their power. This is about power. This is about control. This is about who is in control. Because if I can control where the money goes, I can control who's in charge of creating the jobs, as an example. If I make sure that the only businesses that are getting money are, say, as an example, instead of making sure that local businesses are able to be open and to be able to employ people, we push everybody into Amazon and make sure that Amazon has a union, which Democrats are promoting. Well, then the government gets to control those unions and that business, and mom and pops go out of business. Therefore, they get to control. It's easier to control one business than it is to control 10. And if there are 9 fewer small businesses, it makes it that much easier for the government to control that one business that has everyone employed. It's about control. It's about being able to focus that control and make sure that they don't have to deal with everyone. They can deal with one person or one organization, and that controls you. This is about control. At the same time that we are watching our nation lose its leadership in the world. Again, I speak to most recently, let's look at Russia, which has insulted our nation and has dictated what we will do in terms of trying to protect our friends over in the Ukraine. We have China scolding America, as they did 2 months ago, in front of the rest of the world, saying, don't talk about the Uyghurs, don't talk about Taiwan. We're telling you that you're too weak to tell us what to do, to tell China how to stop genocides. We've seen it from North Korea, which is saying that they're going to shoot off nuclear missiles and they're going to test them and they're going to plan to attack the United States because they don't think our leadership is strong enough to do anything about it. And what are we getting instead? We have Vice President, Kamala Harris, who not only doesn't appreciate the military and what they have done, but she's further insulted our allies in South Korea, wiping her hands in disgust after shaking the hand of the South Korean president, which no one in the world has forgotten about. And this is the leadership we're talking about? And if you think I'm wrong, please tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me how this isn't negatively impacting our nation. Tell me how this is not creating a system that allows us to be more and more free and have more influence on the world and helps the world to say, you know what, that freedom that the United States has, that's something I want to emulate. That's something that I want to do. And think about it. Under the Biden-Harris administration, what are we seeing? What's the example being said? You know what? The American people are so free that they cannot tell China to not commit Jewish genocide. That the United States is so weak, they can't help protect their own ally in the Middle East. And that Egypt has to do it. A country that hates Israel. That's troubling. That is absolutely mind-bogglingly terrifying. And that same administration, that same government is telling us that we have people like you may have seen. And this is David Chipman in 2019. And I want you to hear what David Chipman had to say.
Thank you for letting me testify today. My name is David Chipman, and I am the Senior Policy Advisor at Giffords, the gun violence prevention organization founded by former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. I am a gun owner, and I served as a special agent for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives for 25 years. Throughout my ATF career, I served on the front lines of our government's efforts to prevent violent crime and effectively regulate the firearms industry. I worked to disrupt firearms trafficking conspiracies along the Iron Pipeline, served on ATF's SWAT team, and later was the special agent in charge of the agency's firearms programs. My time as a federal law enforcement officer taught me that although all weapons can be dangerous in the wrong hands, some weapons are particularly lethal and should be more strictly regulated.
Okay. And Mike, by the way, Mike Bowie has mentioned that Kim Jong-un executed an orchestra and conductor last week, shooting him 90 times. And the United States did nothing. They said nothing. When Kamala Harris, at the same time that Kim Jong-un was annihilating one of his citizens ridiculously for no reason, Kamala Harris, who was in charge of the conversation with our ally, South Korea, said nothing about it. That Kamala Harris, not Biden, who knows the leaders of all the world, as he said, and the reason why he asked people to elect him is because of his relationship with these international world leaders. Kim Jong-un was not concerned and not worried, and Kamala Harris had nothing to say about it. I'm sure South Korea was encouraged as they watched her not only not mention anything, but also her act of disgust and shaking the hands of our ally. But let me bring us back to this man, David Chipman, who I just showed you and we were just speaking about. And his comments on September 25th of 2019, where he admitted that he is part of the anti-Second Amendment organization and that he is seeking to remove firearms, saying that some weapons are deadlier than others. And he's right. some things can be more deadly because human beings make them more deadly. See, he kind of misses something here, and he doesn't tell you the absolute truth. He's not telling you what's really important in that. He said, well, firearms are deadly, that the AR-15 is deadly, that you being able to own a firearm and defend yourself, well, that's deadly. Except he's not telling you the truth because he's misrepresenting things. And I will prove this for you. I will show you how wrong he is about this because this is an assault on your freedom. It's taking away your Second Amendment rights. It's taking away your ability to protect yourself and your loved ones and your property. This is the government saying they are smarter than you and that they have more control over your life. Let me explain what I mean. Many people may not be aware that this is from the FBI. So the source is not some left-leaning or right-leaning. This is the FBI. This is their report, the preliminary Uniform Crime Report from January to June of 2020. This is telling us what's going on in America. And what we know for sure is, in the first 6 months of 2020, the number of murders and non-negligent manslaughter increased 14.8%, just under 15%. Aggravated assault was up 5.6%. That was before the riots. That's before the autonomous zones that exist at this moment. That was before all of that we saw a 15% increase. And here's the part that David Chipman did not tell you in 2019. This is the lie that he promoted. I want you to see on this chart, and I'm going to take away my face here for a second. If you look right here, this is 2020, murder victims by weapon. And what you will see are that handguns, matter of fact, let me put myself back here. I want you to see this. And I want you to look right here on the right-hand side of the screen. And here are the rifles. This is the AR-15 that David Chipman wants to take away from you. He's telling you it's deadly. That is the worst thing possible. That it is the reason why we see that murder was up 15%. 3% of all homicides in the United States were committed by rifles. That would include the AR-15. That's every type of rifle. That's the Ruger Mini 14. That is the AK-47. That is the AR-15. All rifles, every rifle you've ever seen, put them together, and that's 3% of all the homicides in the United States. 3%. If you're saying, well, what does 3% mean? That's 3% of the population. No. That's 364 murders. We have 330 million people in the United States. 330 million people in the United States. An estimated 160 million people who own at least 1.5 firearms. And 364 murders were by a rifle, semi-automatic or otherwise, an assault weapon, however you want to name it. By the way, when he says there are things that are more deadly, he's right. Knives are responsible for 1,481 murders in the United States in the first 6 months of 2020. That's over a 400% increase. 400% more deadly than rifles. The very thing that this man is saying you should not have because it's too deadly for your life, that you will die because of an AR-15 that exists out there. And the actual numbers from the FBI tell you that the thing that's actually more deadly are knives. The steak knife in your house is more deadly. If we know for a fact, and numbers are consistent every year. We have shown you the numbers year after year after year because we've had this conversation every time that we see Democrats come up and progressives come up and say, we need to take away your firearms. We have to take away your rifles, your semi-automatic rifles, because you are not safe, because they're too dangerous for you. And every time we look at the data, we see the same thing. Rifles are not the thing that you should be worried about. They just aren't. Knives are deadlier. People's hands, let me say this, let me show you. The FBI is showing you. People's hands and feet kill 600 people in the same time that rifles, those ever so deadly assault rifles, those weapons that we hear the news media constantly they're trying to tell you that this is the most dangerous thing to your life. And people's hands are deadlier by over 50%, almost 70% deadlier to you is someone's hands and feet. 400% more deadly are knives. And yet they're telling you that they're going to protect you, that the government is going to protect you, that David Chipman is going to protect you because he's part of the government. And progressives are smarter than you are. They're so smart that they won't look at the data that is actually there and tell you that, well, that's really not the worst thing that could possibly happen. Some 9,000 people die every year from drunk driving accidents. Minimally, 9,000 people a year. 300 a year. Those numbers, you can go back and check the FBI data. It's roughly the same every year. Roughly 300 to 400 people die from rifles every year, period. 9,000 people die from drunk driving in cars, in motor vehicles. And you have to tell me that the deadliest thing in America, the thing that we have to do is we have to remove the Second Amendment to protect you from the 400 rifles that may be less than 400 rifles that are used to kill an American citizen every year. But cars are perfectly fine. People's hands are deadlier, and knives are even more significantly deadly. And I have to ask you a question. If that's the case, if everything else is so much more deadly, and they are, demonstrably, it is a fact, then what are they really doing? Are they really trying to protect you, or are they just taking away your freedom? Because they don't appreciate the fact that you are free. They don't appreciate the people who sacrificed their lives. They don't appreciate the impact on the American citizen. They don't appreciate the fact that it's going to cost you more to live under their rules, that they are going to take away the value of your life because they think they know better. Let me answer a question. So Shauna has joined us. Hello, Shauna. And she says, why not? You took away their drugs to which drug companies can't patent. Drugs are the Republican boogeyman, as guns are the Democrats' boogeyman. So much for the Republic. I don't know what you mean by that. I truly don't. Drugs are generally bad. Any drug addiction is generally bad. Addiction is bad. And if you're saying, should we have more people addicted than not? I would say no. And do I think it's better to have people on more mind-altering substances? I would say no. But we're a nation of freedom. And if the majority of the nation says we should allow people to indulge in mind-altering drugs, well, that's a choice for the American people. And many states have made that decision, like the United States. And we've watched in each of those states that it has increased the number of people who have died. Like the number of people, just look at Colorado and their data and see that there has been an over 300% increase in the number of people who have died because of being under the influence while driving and committing being convicted of manslaughter. That is a fact. Now, if the American people decide that that's what they want, no one's stopping it. But I don't think that's the best thing we could possibly do. At the same time, I definitely don't think that it is making me more free when we are being told a lie. When we're being told a lie that All you have to do is give up a little more freedom, and the government is going to protect you from something that isn't a problem in the first place. The number of people who are dying because of rifles is less than the number of people who die in this nation from driving while under the influence of drugs like marijuana. That is a fact. More people die because of driving while under the influence of marijuana than they do from assault rifles, as they are often called in the media. More people die from just about everything, including hands and knives, than assault rifles. So why are progressives so willing to attack that issue? Because it's a lack of leadership. Because this is about power. Because this isn't about freedom. So Shauna has gone on to say, is it any better to wage a war on individuals for drug use in the name of safety and security? I believe it is. As I said, we have more people who die because of driving while intoxicated under the influence of marijuana than we do from assault weapons. And Shauna says that we are not free. We are living in a lie. That is an opinion, Shauna, although I do believe we are losing more and more freedom. A majority, she says that it's a majority rule. How very democratic. So if the majority decides no guns, you're okay with that. If the majority of Americans have decided to repeal, and when I say the majority of Americans, it would require a two-thirds of all states would have to agree on repealing the Second Amendment for us to lose that right. Do I agree with that? If that is the decision and will of the nation, that's what we live on. That's the basis of our rules. Do I think it's possible to see two-thirds of the state of the United States under the will of the people of those states to say that we should get rid of our Second Amendment rights? No, I don't think that's possible. I don't think that will happen. And I don't think that people would support that. So, yeah. People do not die from cannabis, she says. Well, that's not true. People do die. They have imbibed marijuana, they drive while under the influence of marijuana, and they commit manslaughter. It is a fact. It is documented. Look at the numbers from Washington State and Colorado. It is a fact. It happens. And no, you cannot grant rights, but you can deny rights. And if you can deny someone's right to the Second Amendment, it would require a two-thirds vote. Because laws are laws. And we live by those laws, and every law that exists is a reduction in our rights and freedoms. That is us giving the government more of our freedoms in exchange for, we believe, a more uniform and safe society. That isn't always what happens. But I wouldn't, it's one thing to say, should we ban, as is the idea from Mr. Chipman, as he has said, he believes that we need to remove the semi-automatic rifles because that's going to make us safer. He believes that that is an exchange of rights that are more free. And it's not just me saying that. That's not just a question I am raising. I want you to see this. This is Senator Lee questioning Chipman about his comments.
With you. I believe Senator Cornyn referred briefly to a statement that I independently found concerning, a statement that you had posted on Reddit back in 2019 when you said, quote, while at ATF, I conducted studies involving people who failed background checks to determine how many later committed crimes with a gun. Many did. This is a perfect opportunity to arrest people before committing crimes rather than responding after the fact, close quote. I find this statement very troubling, especially troubling for someone who's been nominated to serve as the ATF director.
Please keep listening.
Because even setting aside for a minute the Second Amendment, even before you get to the Second Amendment, this violates our most fundamental rules of due process, talking about a desire to arrest people before committing crimes rather than after the fact. It's not how our criminal justice system works. And if that's how you view people, that is concerning to me. Now, this is compounded by other comments you've made that, to me, reflect a certain degree of disdain.
Well, I'm going to skip ahead in a second here because his main argument here, and the main question that is being asked. And he's going to go on with his statements in a moment, but I'm going to give you the response by Mr. Chipman. And again, the links will be in here so that you can see this for yourself. But I want you to understand, this is David Chipman has already said that he believes that rifles, semi-automatic rifles, that millions of people, tens of millions of people have right now, are deadlier than your hands and your feet. Your hands and knives, which is demonstrably and absolutely factually incorrect and has always been incorrect. And that same man now says that we should pre-crime, without any crime being committed, that certain American citizens should be punished and should have their rights denied. And I want you to hear what he has to say about that.
Senator, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address both of these comments that I believe were misunderstood and taken out of context. I'll start with the first. When I was talking about the prosecution of people who had lied and tried to buy a gun, clearly those people who lie and try have committed a serious federal felony. And what I suggested is if we did research, we could determine which of those people were most likely to later commit some violent crime. And I do believe it would be ATF's mission, that of prosecutors, to prosecute those people who committed a serious federal felony before, striking again and killing someone. With respect.
Okay, so did you hear what he just said? If you've done something, that you broke some law, that you should be prosecuted before you ever commit another crime without any due process because you're a danger to the public. Imagine that. This is exactly what we have heard from some of the worst leaders in our world. And this is someone who is part of the Biden administration, part of the Biden-Harris administration, someone who is being supported by them, someone who has misinformed the public already in 2019, who doesn't understand what the Second Amendment is for, someone who doesn't value your freedom and your rights. He doesn't value, based on his statements, your freedom and the lives that have been given already in our nation to have the freedoms we have today, just like Kamala Harris. I want you to understand that. You've heard his words by himself right then and there. He does not value your freedom, even though it is demonstrable that what he is saying is incorrect, that it is a fallacy, that he is lying to you. Can you imagine that? He is actively lying to you. I have shown you the evidence already that disputes his claim that you will be safer if we get rid of AR-15s, which is only one type of semi-automatic rifle. And of the total of them, the FBI has identified only 364 people have died from, which is sad. Anyone dies, but already we know 600 people died from someone's bare hands. We know that over 1,481 people died from knives. The primary focus, if you're trying to save people's lives, are not AR-15s, which are even a smaller subset than all semi-automatic rifles. And yet he is willing to not only take away your freedom to own a firearm to defend yourself, he is also willing to criminalize you even further. Now, here's the thing. How does that tie together? Very simply, if you look at it, if they criminalize, there are over 10 million people who own, as an example, an AR-15. Well over. And if, like in New York State right now, under the New York SAFE Act, it is illegal to own an AR-15. So you are a criminal for the mere possession of a firearm because the law changed, because the impression of certain leaders or individuals who are elected to a leadership position, decided that it's too scary for you to own that. That means, under Mr. Chipman's view, as he just described, you have now committed a felony, because if they ban, as is being proposed under Senator Feinstein, if you own that firearm that has already been made illegal, you are now a criminal. And he wants to then punish you further because you have committed a crime by owning that AR-15. He wants to now further take away your rights and to criminalize you and to throw you in jail for the possession of that firearm that he doesn't believe you should have, even though it is the least deadly thing, or one of the least deadly things, in the United States at this time. Now, I don't think I have misunderstood this. I have shown you evidence from the FBI itself. I have shown you evidence of what Mr. Chipman has said himself. He has said that this is a crime. You should not have it. Your freedom is not worth it. And by the way, it doesn't matter. He seems to agree with Kamala Harris that the fact that people died for you to have that right, a right that has protected the United States from invasion. Literally, one of the reasons why Japan did not invade the United States, while Germany did not invade the United States in World War II, is the fact that, I believe it was Monmoto who said that to invade the United States is to find a rifle behind every blade of grass. That is the kind of problem you would have. And if the American people are able to protect themselves to that extent, no one wants to fight that kind of war. And that protects us, not only just from each other, from criminals, but it protects us from being invaded. And they want to take away that freedom. They want to take away that safety net because they don't want you to be in control of your life. That's the only conclusion I can come from with this. And it gets even worse. And I'm going to come back to the comments in just 1 second. But I want you to understand the true depth of the problem that we are facing from not only Chipman, but from the Biden-Harris administration on their views. And I want you to see, and this is Senator Cruz, who is speaking to Mr. Chipman. I want you to hear this.
Mr. Chipman, a minute ago, Senator Whitehouse asked you if any of your views on guns are out of step with the majority of the American people. The AR-15 is one of, if not the most popular rifle in America. It's not a machine gun. It's a rifle. Your public position is that you want to ban AR-15s. Is that correct?
Senator, thank you for the question, and thank you for our visit yesterday and offering me a Dr. Pepper. It made me reminisce about my time in Central Texas. But now to your question. With respect to the AR-15, I support a ban as has been presented in a Senate bill and supported by the President. The AR-15 is a gun I was issued on ATF's SWAT team, and it's a particularly lethal weapon. And regulating it as other particularly lethal weapons, I have advocated for. As ATF director, if I'm confirmed, I would simply enforce the laws on the books. And right now, there is no such ban on those guns.
Okay.
So you want to ban the most popular rifle in America.
Hold on. I want you to think about what he just said. And I want you to, and I'm going to come to the comments in 1 second. But he just said, he wants to ban the AR-15 because it is a deadly weapon. It is seriously dangerous to the American people. Here is, and again, I will show you. This is from the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Crime Data Explorer for 2020, the first 6 months. We're looking at, this is 364. Again, and we'll go to percentages just to make it easy for people. 11% of all of the homicides in the United States were by knives. Another 4% were by people's hands. 3% by blunt objects like a hammer or a baseball bat. That is 18% of all murders in the United States. 3% were from every type of rifle you could possibly name, including the smaller group, which is just the AR-15. And he is again lying to the American people that you will be safer if he takes away your right to have that AR-15. He's talking about, and let's assume every single rifle, semi-automatic rifle death in the United States was due to an AR-15, which is a lie. That would be 3% versus the 18% from knives, from bare hands, and from blunt weapons. That is 6 times more deaths. And he is telling us that he wants to remove them and that it is not yet a law, but it may well be. And this is the lie that is being put in front of you. That he is saying, well, no, this is absolutely deadly because I've had this in my hands before. Well, guess what? People have had knives before. Is he going to ban knives? Is he going to ban hammers? Is this the direction that they want to go to? Is this the reason why people have died for the United States? So that you would not be able to have a knife, to be able to have a steak knife, to be able to have a hammer. Is that why people died? Because we know that Kamala Harris can't appreciate why people died. She didn't care. She thinks it's just another fun day to have off. And Joe Biden isn't in charge because Kamala Harris is having all the conversations. She's the one talking to South Korea. She's the one who's in charge of our border. She's the one running around having speeches with our naval, with the U.S. Naval Academy. She's the one who's in charge of our nation, speaking with world leaders. And the weakness that we are seeing is leading to more global terror. And they're seeing that more and more, these people are lying to American people, saying that the threats are somewhere that they do not exist and that they have never existed. And let me prove that to you. Here is the report from 538, a left-leaning organization. So it's not just me. This is the left speaking about this. 538 on October 3rd, 2017, when they investigated mass shootings in America. And their comment, their final thought was, where is it? If we focus on mass shootings as a means of understanding how to reduce the number of people killed by guns in this country, we are likely to implement laws that don't do what we think we want them to do, and miss opportunities to make changes that really work. Gun violence isn't one problem, it's many, and probably won't have a single solution either. The answer from the left is, when they are being honest, banning assault rifles, as they like to call them, in other words, semi-automatic rifles, is not going to make you safer. It is not going to protect you. And yet, they want to take this away from you. And you have to ask the question, then what happens? Maybe you don't think 538 is smart enough. Maybe you say, well, what do the experts have to say? Let's look at the experts, which would include, and I want to show you, this is, if you're telling me it has to be from a university, well, how about the mass shootings report based on Professor James Allen Fox of Northeast University, Monica DeLutter of Northeast University, in their study of over 40 years of mass shootings in the United States. And what they come to is the same realization that we are being lied to. And you can review this for yourself. And I said the links will be in there. But let me come back to the comments, because I want you to understand how much freedom is free. If we're being lied to, and we're being told we need less and less freedom, and the government will protect more and more of our lives, how much freedom do we deserve? Let me look at the comments here. So, let's see, Dow mentions, hey Dow, it's good to see you here. He says, Chipman is going to charge and process Hunter Biden. And actually, he was asked that question, and the answer is no, he will not. So Dow, no. Even though he wants to take away your right to be able to own certain firearms, even though he wants to, Mr. Chipman wants to throw you in jail and prosecute you without a crime being committed, even though he wants to do that, he will not prosecute Hunter Biden on the crime that he has already committed, that has already been proven, that already exists. Because Hunter Biden is protected. You are not. Hunter Biden is powerful. You are not. Hunter Biden has the protection of China and the money from China, as well as from Russia. You do not. So you are a threat, but Hunter Biden's okay. Shauna mentions that due process is common law. See the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments. And yet, Shauna, we are being told by the Biden administration, by Kamala Harris, we are being told by David Chipman that the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th Amendments and the 2nd Amendment do not apply. We're looking at the red flag laws do not apply, that they will take away your rights. So how much freedom is freedom? As we look at the lives of those, as we celebrate the lives of those who have died to protect the 2nd Amendment, the 4th Amendment, the 5th, the 6th, the 10th, to protect our lives and our ability to live these lives, and we are giving away those lives, we are giving away those freedoms by the Biden, Harris, and Chipman. That terrifies me. Dow says that Chipman, reminds him of Ron White. Yeah, he does. Dow mentions that the rifle behind every blade of grass is absolutely true. Dow goes on to say that Chipman seems like a key figure necessary to close the fist on centralized power for the federal government. And I do believe it. If we have someone who's in charge of the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, if this individual is out prosecuting people without any crime ever being committed and trying to demonize people for owning a firearm he doesn't like, that's a problem. Marvin. Hey, Marvin. Marvin McKinney says, thank God for Texas. And I think we need many more states like Texas who are standing up and saying, you have this right. We believe in the American people, because 99% of all firearm owners, 160 million people, are not a problem. That's just a fact. There's 160 million people who own at least 1.5 million firearms. And we don't see problems. They're not the problem. Criminals are the problem. Criminals are the smallest segment. They are a fraction of the total number of people in America. And yet we see these individuals like Biden, like Pelosi, like AOC, like Bernie Sanders, like David Chipman, that want to punish you for being something different than what they want. And they want to deny you and take away your freedoms. That is dangerous. Dow mentions that as a rifle platform, the Armalite 15, or otherwise known as the AR-15, ownership being so popular, any bans on it would instantly make criminals the route ownership of a good chunk of the population. And that's my point. They want to make it a crime to own it, and as according to Chipman, who obviously reflects the point of view of the Biden and Harris and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they're the people who nominated him, who want him to be in this position with the ATF. Their overall strategy is, if they can make this illegal, you are a criminal, and then they can further charge you with crimes without you ever committing a crime, without any due process, and then to further subjugate you, increasing their power and destroying your freedom. No one else in the news media is willing to answer this question and show you it, and I am. And that is a very important thing. And you don't have to agree with me, but I am giving you the evidence that you have been consistently lied to. We have evidence from universities and professors that show us that the number of mass shootings that have been happening are, if anything, down, not higher. that the number of mass shootings, especially school shootings, have decreased since the 1990s, and that firearms, that these that semi-automatic rifles are one of the least deadly things in the United States. That is a fact, proven by the FBI. But the news media and those elites in the Democratic, Socialist, and progressive parties, they want you to be in fear. They want you to be terrified. They want you to think that you have to rely on the government. And when I say the government, I don't mean your local police, because they want to get rid of the local police. But they do want you to have government. They want government control directly over your life. And tell me how that, when you consider that, and you look at Memorial Day tomorrow and today, as we celebrate those who have died, how does that match? Did they give up their lives so that the government can come in, get rid of the police, and take over your personal life and be able to control it by making you impoverished and without any ability to defend yourself? I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think that's the right thing to do? Is that what we want? It's a question. And I again say, you can call into 607-242-1582. You can leave a comment on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, and you can say, Mike, I agree, maybe I disagree. I want to hear what your thoughts are. Dow mentions that all these issues that we see now are, at the core, the result of what happens when the system no longer respects the consent that is supposed to come from the governed. I would say that this is a result of not respecting the fact the government is a servant of the people. That people died to enforce the idea that we, the people, are the government, that we select those who serve us, that they are to be responsive to our needs and our beliefs. And for some reason, my system seems to have, oh, there, it froze. I don't know why it froze there, folks. I apologize. And it seems we're having a problem now. It seems like the internet overlords are, we're temporarily having an issue here. But let me say it again. It seems like that there is a problem that is coming from, and it seems to be from the progressive and socialist wings of the Democratic Party. The very loud, vocal, fringe faction that are hyper partisan, that are trying to control and gain more control over your life. And they're doing it on many ways. And I've been focusing on the Second Amendment, but it is hardly the only thing that they are doing. But I think the Second Amendment highlights it so clearly that when we look at the actual evidence, we see that it isn't the problem at all. And I do understand that there are people who have died recently, and I'll give you an example, and you see this in the news media. They want you to be afraid. They want you to be terrified. They want to highlight things like we see here in the Miami Herald, where 2 people were killed, 20 people were wounded in a mass shooting at a rap concert. And we don't know why this happened, and we don't know who did it. And there were several events in Miami over this weekend. And yes, we know that all 3 of these events may have been conducted by the same group of people, or in retaliation for one of the attacks back and forth between these small groups. And they want you to be afraid by that. And they want you to think, oh my God, Miami is in so much trouble. Yeah, but that's really isolated, because it really isn't the biggest problem we have in America. Again, we have more people dying from drunk driving. We have more people who are dying from driving while intoxicated. There's our problems. There's a bigger issue. In the meantime, our government, as I mentioned before, and as I showed you before, is wasting money on things that have absolutely no impact, like finding out giving cocaine to quails, like spending $2 million to decide whether or not that shield, the sneeze shield on food at the salad bar in restaurants, whether or not that's something you should have. That they are more concerned and more worried about these silly things, and that they want to literally destroy our incomes. That the Biden administration, by its actions, will create $50 million in debt, while taking in exactly the same number in taxes. Same thing that we're getting in now, which will result in more people who are not employed. That in the best case scenario, 158 million people will be working, which is 1 million people less than were working in 2020. That 20 years ago, we employed more people with less people in this nation because the Biden administration is that much of a failure, and they want to force you to be dependent on the government. Because if you don't have a job and you need to eat, that you need to survive, what are you going to do? Chris Jones is here. Hey, Chris, it's good to see you. Dal says that it's horrible. And I agree with you. And let me prove when I say, if they take away your right to own a firearm, and then they make it a crime for you to own the firearms they don't want you to have, and they're able to punish you. And if we know that if we follow the Biden administration's $6 trillion spending spree, that will result in just the next 4 years in double the national debt, in fewer people working in the United States than were working in the year 2000, then here's the thing, and this is important. More people will be unemployed, and what does that mean? How will you survive? They're going to do the same thing they're doing right now. They're going to propose a fourth stimulus check. Matter of fact, they're not just going to put in a stimulus check, but as was stated in March by 10 progressive lawmakers, the progressives are leading this charge, such as Senator Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, have suggested that we need to have regular stimulus payments, that the government is going to pay you. More than 21 Democrats have said they want you to get a regular check, that the government is going to take care of you, that they're going to give you money because you cannot work and you will not be able to defend yourself, that you will be completely dependent on the government for every aspect of your life. This is what they are proposing. This is what they are getting you used to. That's why you see them continuously putting out another stimulus plan, and every time the stimulus plan is, here's another check. Here is another check. Oh, you're not going to work? Here, we're going to give you money to not go to work. Let us give you more and more money so you are more and more dependent on the government. Let there be fewer and fewer smaller businesses, and that you will, if you're going to work, you're going to work at a union, and you're going to work at a business that has a union, so that the government has easier and easier control of your life. And if you don't like it, you will not be able to defend yourself. And if you try to defend yourself, they will punish you without law, without due process, more and more. That is, if I'm understanding it correctly, I believe that is an authoritarian dictatorship. I don't know how else to describe it. And I can say that that is absolutely not what the Memorial Day is there to immortalize, to remind us. And rather than trying to remind us of this, we see that Kamala Harris is actively trying to ignore it, to wipe this message away, to tell you that it's just a day off. It is just another day that the government is giving you, that it is their choice, and it is not about the sacrifice that has been given by others for you to enjoy your freedom, like free speech, like the ability to defend yourself, like the ability to work for yourself. People may disagree with me, but I don't think I think when we look at this and we're looking at the impact and the consequences of what they are talking about, that we see that this is the reality. Because what you never hear from politicians is, and what is the consequence of what is happening? You say to me, Mike, but they're not going to stop us from being able to go to work. And again, I refer you back to the fact that they are doing that, as was seen when I spoke with the Libertarians and Assemblyman Brian Manktolo. They are destroying our ability to have individual businesses. They are destroying our ability to be able to go to work. They are encouraging us to be more and more dependent on the government that is going to give you what you need, to give you what they think you need, and not more, and tell you that you are wrong to try and even seek or decide that you want more. That deciding that you want to be free and to make your own choices is a crime. And that's something that's important, which is why you don't hear this argument coming from the major news media. You don't hear this from other political commentary. You don't see this overwhelmingly in the media because it's not left-leaning. It's not in support of a socialist movement. Because socialism thrives on these ideas. Socialism is these ideas. It is the subjugation of your freedom. And it has a great selling. It sells really well. You're going to be so free. You will have the things you need. Do you want what someone else has? Do you want some of their things? Should we redistribute these things from the big, evil, rich people? It sounds great until you stay, and then what happens? What's the consequence of this? What is the cost? I know what the cost of freedom is. We have seen that over history and time. We have seen the sacrifice. What we haven't seen is, what is the cost and penalty for giving up, for forgetting what people have died for, the freedom that we have in the freedom of speech that we see the internet overlords want to take away from us and are actively trying to take away from us? And they are doing it. Look at what's happening to Steven Crowder. Look at the millions of people that Twitter has punished and thrown away and taken away their free speech. Look at the people on Facebook who have been denied the free speech for even asking the question, should I be vaccinated? That we have just seen from Project Veritas that has come out and revealed to us that they have a plan to silence people, and they are categorizing and tracking people who dare say, hey, this vaccine has consequences. It has hurt children. It has hurt individuals. It is untested. Isn't that a concern? And for merely saying that, you are put onto a list. Just like they put people onto a list for supporting President Trump, that they have put people on a list for supporting the Second Amendment. Why do they need these lists? Why do they want you to forget what the sacrifices that have been made for the freedoms that we have? Why do they want to redefine the freedoms we have right now? To redefine what it is what racism is, to redefine what the Second Amendment is, to redefine what it is to be free. Why are they doing that? And I again ask, and I wish that we could hear people from the progressive left, individuals like the Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, individuals like BLM and Antifa, these secret organizations that hide in the shadows trying to use intimidation and fear to cause people to submit against their will. I wish they would come forward, but they won't. They'll profit. They'll take your money. They go and they buy their houses, and they live lives that you can't have as they take away your rights and your freedoms. So how free should we be? How free will the government allow us to be? And that's a terrifying question. Now, again, you can call in 607-242-1582, or you can leave a comment, as you can see being done by Michael Bowie and Dal Grimm, and you've seen from Chris Jones and so many other people on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. Even as this is being actively suppressed, and it is, this is being suppressed right now by the internet overlords. They don't want you to have this conversation. They don't want the rest of the world to see this conversation. They want the rest of the world to submit. They are bending over backwards. We watch Hollywood. We watch John Cena bend over backwards to kiss the ass of China and the communist government, the socialists out there in the world, to beg them for their forgiveness for saying things like, you shouldn't have genocide. You shouldn't commit genocide. That you shouldn't try and kill innocent civilians because they don't agree with your religious beliefs or because they don't agree with your style of government, as we see Iran has done in supporting Hamas to attack innocent civilians in Palestine. This is the problem. They don't want you to think about the consequences. They want you to think about their sales pitch that has never been true, ever. Socialism has never provided freedom for the people who have been subjugated to it. Never in the history of the world. And it never will. Because it's not about freedom, it's about power for an elite few. One moment. Some would say, and I see Shauna has said, that I make the same argument against drugs to which the which liberals make against guns. That's not true. I have never said that someone should be thrown in jail without due process because they use a drug. I have never said that. But we do see progressives say that if you have a firearm that they don't like, you should be punished by law without due process. That is what red flag laws do. That is a fact. That is what we have just heard David Chipman say. That is what they believe. I have never said that. Do I think that marijuana should be legalized? No, I do not. But that's not the same thing as saying that if you have marijuana in your possession, without due process, you should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. So to say that my position is the same position as those who would punish people for owning a firearm is not accurate. It is not true. That is not the same thing. There are big differences. But socialism wants to use that argument against us. They want us to think, well, just because you have freedom, that if your freedom is not equal in everything, that therefore you don't have freedom at all. That's the socialist ideal. They would prefer you to be addicted to a mind-altering psychoactive drug rather than to have the ability to be able to defend yourself against a government that is taking away your freedom, that is making you dependent over and over again, is making you dependent on that government. And if you don't believe me, think about what we are seeing. John, hey, John. John Solak has joined us. He's a good friend of mine. John says that Broome County is a socialist paradise. It is becoming that. Dal has mentioned that socialism is all about power and regulation for a group that self-proclaims themselves to know better. And it is true. because we keep seeing these small groups of elites that say, don't worry, we're going to do this for you. Well, what have they resulted in? They have resulted in, if we follow their guidance, if we allow the Biden administration to spend $6 trillion to tax these middle class, to destroy our small businesses, we result in $50 million in debt. We wind up in an inflationary hell. We wind up being dependent on the constant payments from the government that they're going to be paying us, and we are now dependent on that government for that next check, for us to be able to survive, to make it through the day. They will control our food, our lives. They will control us. And if you think I'm wrong, just think about how much less you can buy, how little or how much less you are able to purchase today versus 20 years ago. To consider the fact that they're projecting in 4 years, we won't have as many people working as we did in 2000. And that's after them giving us free stuff. All these stimuluses. It's part of a way of taking away our freedom. To think that we're going to have more people out of work in 4 years following the Biden administration guidelines than we had just 2 years ago under the Trump administration. We won't even recover what we had 2 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. And we will be less free. The government will have more power to throw you in jail, to punish you without ever committing a crime on the books, either through red flags or the other operations that are coming from Mr. Chipman in terms of the ATF. It's insane. And it is great to see you. They're trying to make us more dependent on government to usher in socialism. And that is what I've been saying. And socialism doesn't make you more free. You know what? Forget the numbers. Forget the facts that we can see in the math itself. Forget the fact that they have promised that they're going to give us money because they're going to take away our ability to have a business. Forget the fact that they are telling us to our faces, like Beto O'Rourke did in 2019, that they are going to take away our rights, not only our rights to firearms and the firearms we have. He promised that. He said it publicly. Forget about the fact that they have individuals like former Justice Stevens and other individuals in our government that have said, we want to take away your rights to the Second Amendment. Let's forget all that. Let's just look at the fact that they believe that socialism, which has fewer rights, is the right thing. Let's ask anyone who have lived under the Soviet Union and 75 years of socialism there. Let's look at the 50 years of socialism that have existed in China. Let's ask people like Lily Tang Williams what it is to be in a communist nation, to live that life. Let's look at the tens of millions of people who are escaping from socialist nations every year, trying to get into the United States, both legally and illegally, and compare that to the 500 people a year that are trying to leave the United States to go to those nations. Let's look at the people at Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, the socialists in the BLM movement. Let's look at these progressives that want to change America into a socialist nation, but they're not willing to go to an actual socialist nation to live. You're not seeing the people in BLM go and move into Venezuela, a nation that is so socialist that its people are starving, that the government of Venezuela is killing its own people, and those people are sending their kids by themselves on a 2,000-mile march and they're not only just sending their kids by themselves 2,000 miles away, they're sending them with drug dealers and sex criminals, sex rings, because the chance that that kid might make it 2,000 miles to be left alone in a desert, as we find constantly, children alone by themselves in the Texas desert, that chance of being found is so much better than living in a socialist nation, because socialism is just that bad. If you take away everything else I have said, all of the evidence that I have shown, if you disregard all the people who have died that we are honoring on Memorial Day and think only of how good is socialism, it is so good that parents in Venezuela will send their kids on a 2,000-mile trek without food or clothing with a bunch of drug addicts and drug dealers, gangs, and sex fiends, on the hope that they might make it to the United States. And that is better than letting that kid grow up in the socialism of Venezuela. And yet, we have people like Kamala Harris, like Nancy Pelosi, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren, Senator Bernie Sanders, that are constantly trying to tell us that, no, but you just don't understand. This is for your own good. We're the government and we're here to help. And this is how we can help you. I mean, what I'm saying, is it making sense? The evidence that I am showing you, is it making sense? Does it make sense to look at the consequences of these actions and realize that this is not what people have died for? That to even ask the question of how much freedom should you have is the worst question that can be asked. It is a problem. And the answer to that, no matter what the answer is less freedom than you had before the question was even asked. And that they're using that question as a way to take away your freedoms. Hang on a sec, folks. Now, I realize that some people don't look at it the same way, that they will distract from the main discussion and the main question of, we need to protect ourselves. We need to appreciate the lives that have been given in all the wars, all the battles, all the struggles for the United States. And that's what Memorial Day is. And that the answer to the question, how much freedom should you have, is all the freedom. That's ideally the perfect answer. But the reality is that we live in a society where together we make certain decisions. We pass laws. And those laws are to benefit us all, where we agree that it is wrong to do certain things and that you don't have every freedom. Which means that, yes, we agree, murder is a crime. We agree that not everyone should have a machine gun, that no one should have, or very few people should have, access to nuclear weapons. I understand that. And in that process, sometimes we lose too much freedom. I agree. But that doesn't mean that just because we don't get to have every single freedom, everything, that we should have nothing. That's why it's not a choice of, as some people would say, well, you're not giving me the right I want, so why should I protect your right to anything else? Some would try and say, well, it's a trade-off. You can only have your freedoms if I have my freedoms. It doesn't work that way, because that's what socialism tells you. You're going to get this freedom, but we have to take away all these other freedoms. That's what David Chipman is telling you. You can have the freedom to own only these firearms, only these guns, only these ways of protecting yourself. And for that, and because we're going to let you have certain things like a shotgun, you're going to lose the right to due process. that you're going to lose the right to have a small business, that you lose the right to do anything to provide for yourself that the government doesn't give you first. And that is actually a let me rephrase that. That is a horrendous choice. And that isn't how it works. Because if you're trading freedoms, you're actually losing freedoms all the way around. If you're trying to trade one freedom for another freedom without consideration of the fact that you're losing all of your freedoms in that, that's a big problem. Now, not everyone will agree with me on that. That's okay. You don't have to agree with me. But I hope that you consider what I'm talking about here. And we have people, and there are people who will say that Memorial Day is just a superficial gesture. I don't agree. I think it's a very important message. I think it's an important statement. I think it's important to remember that freedom is not free, that it has a cost. And that cost is not government control, but it is our actions, us actively taking into account our freedoms and appreciating them and actually using them. To own firearms, to decide what is our way of life, to open up a business, to employ people, to decide how much to pay those individuals, to be a nation where other people around the world are desperate to come to, that they will wait in line for 20 years to enter, that they will come and they will try and enter illegally because it's just that good, that it's so good that they will commit horrendous acts of child abuse to send their children 2,000 miles with sex slavers and drug dealers to try and put that kid into that land because it is just that good. It's a horrible way to evaluate what freedom is worth, but it is an accurate description of what freedom is worth. When you see that that's what people will do for a taste of the freedom that we have, it tells you how good that freedom is and that we should never give it up, especially not for such false hopes and beliefs that we are seeing around the world. People are living and saying, it doesn't work. It's not worth it. Don't give up. Mavis says, I've been out of town for 2 weeks and did those socialist candidates win in Binghamton? And Mavis, thank you for bringing that up. Mavis is talking about the the Binghamton City school district vote. It was a choice of indoctrination where the public was able to choose who's going to be in charge of their school board. And I can tell you that one individual representing the progressive leaders of tomorrow did get in. So there are now 2 members of 9 that are seeking to indoctrinate our children into critical race theory. There are 2 individuals on the school board who are promoting the idea that you are evil based on your skin color, that based on your skin, you should be treated differently than other individuals, not the character you have, not by your actions, not by your beliefs, but merely because of the color of your skin, which is racist. Critical race theory is racist. BLM and the organization and Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow and the far left are racist organizations that are seeking to teach our children racism. And 2 members of the Binghamton City School Board now promote that racist ideology. Out of the 3 that were able to be elected, one was one of those socialist progressive who believe in that racism. 2 of them weren't. And the individual that I specifically was standing up against, and I was saying did not qualify and should not be on that school board, which was Cecil Hopkins, my challenge with the state of New York Commissioner of Education is still under review. Cecil did not win, but the case that I made, that people who are under the mind-altering influences should not be able to sign a petition for a candidate, and to do so is abusive, that is still under decision. That is still awaiting a final decision. We must protect people where we can. And when those who would abuse individuals, that would use drugs or alcohol to try and take advantage of other human beings, we should call that out. And we will see if New York State will stand by that. Dow mentions that the war on drugs, which I believe is an ineffective approach, was adopted by the U.S. from the UN legislation outlining schedules of illicit drugs. You know, the war on drugs is a tricky question. It has its benefits, it has its failures. But I can tell you what, much as many people may disagree with it, it is still a better process and a better plan than we see around the rest of the world. Again, I will pose to you, look at the rest of the world. No one's running to go into Colombia. No one's running to get into Venezuela. They're not running into Honduras, the middle, Nicaragua. They're not trying to go to those countries where these drugs are far more prevalent. They're not going to Mexico, where these drugs are far more prevalent and more people are using these drugs. They're not doing that because it's not a better life. It may dull the senses. It may distract people from a better life, from the fact that they're not having a better life, but it isn't the same. And I fear that this movement to try and convince people to be more, to use more and more mind-altering substances is a way to make people docile, to use them to agree to laws that they wouldn't normally agree to, and to therefore steal people's freedom. And those who say, well, that isn't what's going to happen, that's exactly what happened in Broome County in the Binghamton City School District election. People were used while they were under mind-altering drugs to benefit a political faction, not to benefit the public. So that is the fear that we should have. That is the thing we should keep in mind. That this is being promoted not to benefit you, but to take advantage of you. Dow says, because by smoking a mind-altering substance to the point that it impairs the ability to drive on public roads, your personal liberty endangers the lives of those who are not impaired. A consequence that follows should be argued with due process in court. And I'm not saying due process is not part of the process, but I am saying we have to be aware of what we're trading off and how people are using these ideas against us. Here, we're going to give you more free money. Notice how they always, it's a stimulus. We're giving you money so you can live, that we're going to improve your life. The problem is the government closed the businesses in the first place. They took away our ability to live our life and now are replacing that with an opportunity to get money from the government instead of going back to being able to have our own businesses, to being able to actually live our life. And they are increasing the cost of living higher than it is able to get paid, so that you still need the government more. We are more dependent, more people are dependent on the government now and the money that the government is giving to individuals than we did in 2019. And the way they did that is in 2020, the government shut down the businesses and said, you need to do what we say or else. And that's terrifying. And they're doing the same thing with Mr. Chipman to our Second Amendment rights. You should be afraid. Just as you were afraid of COVID, you should be afraid of the AR-15. And we're going to take away all your rights Not just that right, but a bunch of other rights as well. We're going to take that away because the government will take care of you, because the government will make you safe, which is a lie. In 50 years of my life, we have never seen the government take more power and make things better. It has spent more money and wasted it on everything it has ever touched. The government has never picked a winner. Whenever it looks at picking winners and losers in business, it has never got it right. It has always cost more money. It has always taken more money away from the public, and it has always resulted in fewer and fewer freedoms for the American people. Not to say that government doesn't deserve to exist, but we have to make sure that it should be as small as possible, doing as little as possible. Dow mentions at the point that, he's having a conversation with one of the other people typing. But again, folks, you have a right to say anything you want. I'm asking you. I'm giving you the evidence, and I'm looking at what happens next. What is the next consequence? You don't have to agree with me. You can tell me, Mike, I don't think that's how it's going to work out. And that's fine, but I ask you this. If I'm wrong, what is the consequence? If we take away due process, what is the benefit to the American people? If we become more socialist, what's the benefit to the American people? If we become more addicted to mind-altering drugs, what's the actual benefit? Where's the benefit? If we have less ability to defend ourselves from, forget the government, what about bad guys? What about the drug dealers? What about the sex slaves? What about the criminals that have every reason and willingness to harm you and your family? What about the terrorists around the world? How is being less able to defend yourself going to make you more safe? Please tell me, if you're more dependent on that next stimulus check or that next monthly check, like a UBI, if you're more dependent on the government giving you money just so that you can survive, how does that make you more free? If you have less rights, how does that make you more free? I don't see it. And that's a problem. And that is a problem. And we need to consider that. And Shauna mentions that, she mentions a common misconception that the majority of mass shootings are individuals who are on drugs, legal drugs, which isn't necessarily true. That actually isn't true. It is a conception, it is a misconception. Just like someone would say, well, almost all the people who have committed these mass shootings are members of the NRA, or that they are right-wing fanatics. That's just not true. It's like saying that, well, white police officers will be violent against people who are not white. That's not true. That's not the evidence that we can see. The actual data doesn't match it. That's the story that we hear often in news media. That is what we are meant to be believing. But when we look at the data, and I have been for 15 years, that's not what's true. That's not to say that individuals who decide that the best answer to their questions about life is to decide that they should kill innocent civilians and innocent people. Do I think that's a mental disorder? Yes, I do. Anyone who would commit a mass shooting, I don't care whether it's at school or anywhere else, anyone who would do that, I think they have a mental defect. I think the people who committed the crimes over the mass shooting in Miami this weekend, and inevitably the number of people who are dying at this moment in Chicago, and I am absolutely sure that the number of people who are being shot and killed in Chicago right now dwarfs the number of people who are being killed in Miami-Dade, and the number of people in Baltimore and St. Louis and in Detroit. But that being said, they are a problem. They do have a psychological problem. I still do not think that justifies destroying the rights of everyone and not focusing on those individuals. Because we know for a fact, if we do what David Chipman says, which is the same thing that has been said since 1994, and actually since the 1970s, where the government, all the Democrats constantly say is, take away the guns, take away the guns, take away your right to have guns, take away your ability to have guns, which, by the way, is racist, because they target the poor, minorities, and women. And they want to take away those rights. Well, has it made anyone safer? Because what they're offering today is no different than when they offered in 1990s, is no different than they offered in the 1970s, and it never works. The only thing that happens is the government becomes more powerful, you become powerless. And it doesn't stop criminals who could care less. But that's, again, you don't have to agree with me. The data speaks for itself. The question isn't the data. The question is, what are the consequences? And this is one of the things I ask you. Because the question is, how much freedom, as we said earlier in the show, as we said at the beginning, how much freedom do you need? Because that's what you are being asked right now. That is what the Biden administration is asking you. That's what Kamala Harris is asking you. That is what the progressives and the socialists are asking you. Not the Democrats, not the moderates, but the voices that we are hearing every day in news media, that we're seeing on CNN, that we're seeing on MSNBC, the ones that we are hearing from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, from Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, from the various figureheads, those voices that we're being told are our leaders when they are not, when they are actually our servants, because that is the nature of our government. They are our servants. What we are being told constantly is, you don't need as much freedom as you have. And you should listen to us, because these human beings who are literally no smarter than anyone else you know are somehow better than you at deciding your life. And I think that's a terrifying idea. So many people have different ways of looking at this. But I want you to think about that. For this Memorial Day, unlike Nancy Pelosi, I want you to think about this question very clearly. And I want you to say, the lives that we have seen that have been committed and dedicated to our freedom, the lives that have been given that give us so much freedom that people around the world are waiting in lines to come into our nation, that people are illegally trying to enter our nation, that they are sending their children, their beloved children, and committing the worst child abuse possible by sending those children with drug dealers and gangs and sex addicts, that this nation is so great that they are willing to make that sacrifice because it is the chance that those kids can make it into our nation is a better life than the ones in socialist nations. That the chance to have the freedom that we have right now is more beneficial than the lives they could possibly lead in their own nations. That's the freedom. That's the choice. That's what we have now. And people like David Chipman, as they lie to you, as they literally lie to you, as we can see, as the evidence shows us clearly that they are lying, that he is willingly and absolutely saying that he wants to punish you, that they want to take away your rights and freedoms, even as they are asked. And it's all right there in front of you. You know, that's what we need to remember, because that's what Memorial Day is about. to remember those who said, our freedom is first and foremost. And that's what our nation is about, freedom. Not every freedom, not freedom for everything, but overall, more freedom than anywhere else in the world. And that is worth dying for. Because people have died for it. Because it isn't free. And there is no quick fix. And there is no benefit when we give the government more and more choice over our individual lives. At least that's the way I see it. That's the understanding that I have. And it seems that the internet overlords don't like us saying that. That's why many of you have seen that we've had problems with this transmission, this live stream today. And around the world, certain places won't be able to see this. They won't be able to hear this. And that's a shame. But I hope that you will understand it. I hope that you will appreciate it. And even those who disagree with me, I hope that they appreciate and understand what I've actually been talking about, what I've actually been posing, the question that I am asking you, and the conclusions that I can see based on the evidence that is given to us. But some won't. But hopefully most will. Folks, I want to thank you. We've been on for about 2 hours and 15 minutes. I want to thank you for spending some of your time, whether it's live today with us here, or whether it's tomorrow or the next day as you watch this, the live stream on replay. We want to thank you for joining us in this free speech. If you have found this to be informative or interesting at all, please like and share. Most of all, please do subscribe so that we can spread this message of this expression of free speech around the world and around our nation, whether you agree or not, to be able to have more people to have this conversation so that we can preserve our freedom that much longer. We thank you. We look forward to speaking to you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we hope, most of all, that you will have a good Memorial Day weekend and take a moment, unlike Kamala Harris, to take a moment to say thank you to those who gave their lives for us to have the freedom we have today. We thank you, and we hope you're going to be well. Thank you all.